What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you again. Just got to check on my audio again. I tested this last night because I apologize again yesterday morning. My audio is not working. All right, my audio is working today. Thank you. Good. All right. Yes, I pulled it up. I watched myself this time. I hope I don't have to do this every time, man. Because usually I just assume it's working and I go. But I don't understand what happened yesterday morning. Because everything was fine. Like I have my Scarlett monitor here. I can hear myself in my headphones. So that indicates that the device is all good. StreamYard says it has my microphone signal. So I don't get it, man. But I tested it last night. Last night it worked. I apologize again. I don't know what happened yesterday morning. Yesterday's plays, I did add an additional play towards the end of my basketball segment yesterday, college basketball, and that one did wind up costing me the day, but I think it was just total BS, man. I mean, I wound up with a 2-2 in one day, and it was a day where I felt like I got every single one of those games right except for the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Bucks, they even almost covered yesterday. I mean, what can you even do? The Bucks, yeah, they got out-rebounded, so they got out-possessed. The Magic put up way more shots than the Bucks did. I was kind of surprised by that because obviously, as I said, it was going to be a shorthanded Magic team without Wagner now, and Banchero still not back. However you pronounce his name, Banchero. I don't like how people pronounce it. It's Banchero. Like huevos rancheros. Yeah, with those guys gone, and I said that line was basically indicating that Giannis was going to play in that game. He did. He was fine in the game. Yeah, that was just a game where Orlando played better than I thought they would, and still Milwaukee shot really well in the game. They still wound up winning the game, and they only missed the cover by like 2 points, basically, or something, or 2.5, whatever it was. So that was the one loss that I think was actually worthy of being a loss. Rutgers won for my first win of the night, early win on Rutgers, and then Philadelphia Flyers. That was an easy win, man. They were winning that game 5-1 late. That game was over. So 2 easy wins right off the bat. I'm like, okay, sweet. Now all I need is to go 1-1 in the remaining 2 games, and I'll at least have a win tonight. But hopefully, I wanted more than that. It seemed like it was going to be a 4-1 night. And you had South Dakota in college basketball. It was a close game, but they were winning towards the end of the game. They were up 3 with, very little time left, like well into the final minute. They were up 3, so I'm like, okay. Basically, they just have to hold on defense for once, which I know is a big ask for South Dakota. They just score a lot. They don't defend. I mean, that was kind of the case yesterday. High-scoring game in that game yesterday. But I'm like, as long as that happens, maybe we'll get an intentional foul here out of it, and they should, win this game by more than 1 and just hold on to this lead. They were up 3 at that point. I don't know what exactly transpired there at the end, but they only wound up winning by 1. So that was a push. I should have gone money line. If I went money line on that, I would have had a winning night. Just unbelievable. You never think that 1 is really going to come into play like that, but at least it was a push. And then Illinois, I thought was going to get there. I mean, Illinois, they had the lead basically the whole game, but they just couldn't really extend it and get margin until the very end. They actually wound up extending it finally, and they were winning by 10 points with 40 seconds left. And when you have a 6.5, there were 6.5s out there after I got done with the show. So 6.5s were pretty predominant out there, so you didn't even have to lay the 7 on that. So 6.5. 7's a key number in basketball because it's 3 possessions. So basically that's the point where if a team falls behind by 7, they'll stop intentionally fouling. So I'm thinking, all right, well, Illinois is now up to a 10-point lead with 40 seconds left. They're going to be able to put this away. All I need them to do is win by 7 here. If it comes down to intentional fouls, we should still get this. And no, they wind up, I don't know what happened at the very end, but they wound up winning by 6 instead. It's unbelievable, man. So that missed by a half point. We'll move on to today. Today we got a very small card today, really. College basketball is not huge today, and then very, very small NBA and NHL cards today. So I'll go through some of this really quickly here. Oh, that was yesterday. I'll go through some of this quick. And yesterday, I think some of my leans were correct as well, which, whatever. So in men's college basketball, I mean, we got a few games, I guess, that maybe I'll mention real quickly. I think Notre Dame, I mean, you could maybe argue that they're kind of in a letdown spot, I guess, because they finally got a big conference win. Well, besides Georgetown, but Georgetown's not as big a win. Syracuse, I mean, Syracuse has been better recently than Georgetown has, at least. Syracuse, very named team, obviously, even though Georgetown at least used to be. But still, that was a big win for Notre Dame. So it could be a letdown spot, but then again, it could also kind of stop this losing momentum they had here, and maybe they'll actually play better. They're playing Dartmouth, and Dartmouth is a very bad team, so, I mean, I'm not going to get involved in it. Notre Dame's down from 18 to 17 and a half, though, so I don't know. I mean, a game I'm not going to play, but I just figured I'd point out Notre Dame they are coming off a win over Syracuse there, which is a decent win at the very least for them. Maine and Duquesne, the rhyming matchup here is just a little bit interesting because you got a 6-5 Maine team against a 2-7 Duquesne team, and yet Duquesne 6.5, 5.5 point favorite here. So the odds makers are telling you something here. They're telling you Duquesne is actually the better team, and to not really look at what the records would possibly suggest here is Duquesne up from 5.5 to 6.5 with juice. It's going towards 7. So if you did want to play Duquesne here, obviously you'd want to get better than the 7 on this. I'm not going to quite do it, but it does look like one of those matchups where the ranking, not the rankings, because these teams are not going to be ranked. The records seem to suggest one thing, but the odds makers are telling you something else entirely. So Duquesne, they faced the more difficult schedule, I think. I mean, Princeton, they were competitive in that game. That's not an easy game. Even Lipscomb is not really that bad. DePaul is actually playing better than they have in recent years, so maybe that's not even that bad of a loss. Milwaukee's decent. South Dakota State's pretty good as well, so kind of sneaky as far as Duquesne's schedule here. It hasn't really been that easy, and St. Peter's has been fairly competitive as well. I played Duquesne in this game against Old Dominion because finally I thought it was a spot where Duquesne hadn't even won a game yet, and I'm like, yeah, they faced a more difficult schedule. Like, the odds makers are telling you something in that game, too. They were the favorite. So kind of a similar thing here. In Maine, they faced the easier schedule, man. I mean, I know Duke was in there, and they lost that game, but other than that, not very impressive. I mean, Richmond is down this year. Quinnipiac is all right, and Fordham, I guess, is all right, but none of these other games are very impressive to me, even though I know Elon did beat Elon Musk. I know they did beat Notre Dame, but all that being said, yeah, the odds makers are telling you what you should think about that game, so I would only look to the Duquesne side in that one. St. John's is coming off that win over Kansas State, which is a pretty big win there. The Rick Pitino led St. John's still, I think. So that's kind of a big win there over Kansas State. Now they're stepping down in class though to face Bryant. Bryant has been a pretty competitive team though. But do I want to come get involved in this game where no doubt St. John's is going to be a huge favorite here. I mean, they're the way better team. They're up from 20.5 to 22. So no, I don't really want to do that. So staying away from all these games. I do have one play today, as I said, and it will be in college basketball if you haven't been able to figure that out, because college basketball is the bigger card here. I mean, significantly so. And this game, IPFW against IUPUI, who is now IU Indianapolis. Still an Indianapolis school. They just changed their name from Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis to just Indiana University, Indianapolis. Probably a good change, but whatever. IPFW here. Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne. They just came off a win over Robert Morris that should have been easier than it was. And Robert Morris kind of gave them a difficult game, which was kind of unexpected there. IPFW is a 9.5 point favorite in that one. So you could argue that IPFW is going to be more focused coming off a game like that where they should have won more easily than they did. Whereas IUPUI, they're coming off a game where they're a pretty big underdog against Northern Kentucky, a 7.5 point underdog at home. And they had the lead late in the game, man. They were up 5 points with 4.5 minutes left, 7 points actually with 5 minutes left. And they completely stalled out and didn't score for a span of almost the rest of the game, actually, and wound up losing the game. So kind of a brutal way to lose there if you're IUPUI, even though I know IUPUI probably is going to get up for a game against IPFW, because IPFW is kind of a bigger brother to them, not only in Indiana, but amongst the Indiana-Purdue universities, although Indiana-Purdue is, I guess, not that anymore. I guess they're just a branch of University of Indiana now. I don't even know. But as far as the like situation is concerned, it does look like maybe IPFW would be the way to look here because they are coming off an unexpectedly difficult game against an inferior opponent. And IUPUI just gave a superior opponent a difficult game. So coming off of that, they might run out of steam a little bit. IPFW is the way better of these two teams, up from 15 to 15 with juice. And IUPUI has been a very bad team, like one of the worst teams in Division I for a while now. And I'm not sure that they're really that much improved, even though their record doesn't look that bad this year. So that's what I'll say about that. And then you got Kentucky. Will be the last one. I'll talk about two more games before I go to my play. Kentucky, I mean, I do think they're in a sandwich spot here. I mean, they just had that close loss to Clemson. They bounced back, and they wound up beating Gonzaga, which I think was a game in, it was in Seattle. So it was almost like not really semi-home, but it was in Gonzaga's home state. And Kentucky took them to overtime and beat them. That's a big win for Kentucky. And now they have to come all the way back, I believe, to Kentucky, and they have to play at home in Lexington against Colgate. And up next, they got Louisville, which is the Battle of Kentucky. That's a big game for both teams, although, as I'll point out in a minute, probably a bigger game for Louisville. And then they have Ohio State after that. So Kentucky, it does look like a sandwich spot here. The problem is Colgate, after they dominated the Patriot League the last couple of years, they're way down this year, so there's no way I'm going to actually be able to come in and play on Colgate. I mean, they've just been too bad of a team. This is too much of a mismatch. Kentucky's a 30.5-point favorite in this one. So up from 29 to 30, it looks like here on Wager Talk screens, or not Wager Talk, pregame. Pregame has the better odds screen. Sorry to Wager Talk, but Wager Talk has the way better content and handicappers over there. But what can you do? I like the odds screen as a tool. So Kentucky is in a sandwich spot, but I'm not going to go in and try to fade that. And Kentucky, I mean, they're a team that pushes the pace, so they could potentially still blow Colgate off the court in that one. I don't want it. And then Nevada and South Dakota State, kind of interesting to me, where Nevada, they're coming off a real ugly loss to Loyola Marymount. I mean, that's not a good loss. And they were coming off a couple of bigger games against VCU, Oklahoma State, and then Washington State. Nevada was actually an 11.5-point favorite in this game against Washington State, though, and they lost. It is a bigger game, though, when you play like a bigger conference opponent, even though I know Washington State is kind of relegated, I think, to the Pac-2 now for a year before I think it becomes the Pac-12 again. But still, Nevada, I mean, after that, they didn't step back up, and they had an even uglier loss, really, even though they were only a 7.5-point favorite in this one. That's still Loyola Marymount. I mean, they're an okay team in the WCC, but that's still, that loss looks way worse. It must feel way worse to you than losing to a bigger conference team like Washington State. So to me, it looks like Nevada's got to be in a bounce back spot here. And that LMU game also is their first true road game, so not really the easiest spot. And you got South Dakota State, who has the better record. I mean, they're a pretty decent team in the Summit, at the very least, but Nevada is still the better team. Nevada's faced the more difficult schedule so far, and they, as we saw, they're 6-3, but South Dakota State's 8-3. South Dakota State's coming off a win where they blasted Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington looks down this year as well. Somewhat of a big win, though, because they just housed them, and it was in the Big Sky versus Summit championship tournament there, whatever it was, challenge, whatever. And now South Dakota State has to go out on the road. They've only played one other road game so far this year, and they lost at Montana. Even though they were competitive in that game, and Montana, I think, is not bad this year. But Nevada's the better team here, and I think if they're going to show up focused and they are in a bounce-back spot, that's the way I would look in this game. But they're down from 11.5 to 10, which is kind of interesting, where could be more of like a numbers move on that one, where the numbers guys just think the numbers a little bit too big. I'm not really sure on that one, but we will wind up seeing what happens in that game. And then the game I'm actually going to play, let's get it up. Let's get the banner up here, man. We got UTEP plus 15 is my one play. That's my only play of the day. So, I mean, it's either going to be a win or a loss today, depending on one game. And I know last night was a very small loss, so I'm still just kind of sitting right just below the break-even point on the year, man. I do not want to lose this year. I want to get this going, man. I'm going to have bowls to talk about. I know I said I was going to do a bowl / college playoff preview I don't know, man. I mean, the bowls themselves, there's just so much going on. It's so much easier to just analyze the bowls on the day and just talk about them. The problem is you're like losing line value on the bowls. So I will say right now that the bowls start earlier, and one of the bowls, there are two bowls on Saturday, which I will talk about on Saturday, but one of the games, you get all these line moves, man. The lines move almost right away in these bowls because like the bettors will come in and see like an advantage and just start taking start grabbing numbers up pretty much, and the number will move. So on that South Alabama versus Western Michigan game, the line has already dropped from South Alabama -10 to like -8 on that one, and I do agree with that move in that one. I do agree with the Western Michigan side in that one, which I will talk about more in detail on Saturday, but the problem is you're already losing that key number of 10, but I think in that one, maybe if you like the number, if you like Western Michigan, I mean, maybe taking anything like above a touchdown is still okay to be playing in that one, even if you did lose the 10. I don't know. Because for me, sometimes I kind of like more information to come in because a lot of these bowls, you're going to see drastic line moves, and a lot of them are just because teams are going to like bench a bunch of their players. Like it looks like Marshall's entire team might not be playing in their bowl game. I mean, it's just there's crazy stuff going on. And once I get to talk about that bowl, there are a lot of conflicting factors in that bowl game. It's against Army. I think that's almost an unplayable bowl to me. So, I mean, at least on the side. But let's get back to college basketball. Let's talk about UTEP before I talk about the very small NBA slate and NHL slate here. I like UTEP in this one. You talk about sandwich spots like I was talking about with Kentucky. Well, their Kentucky counterpart here, Louisville, they're in what I think is the biggest sandwich spot of the day. Louisville's up from 14 to 15. Don't see the percentages yet. I'm going to grab the points with UTEP in this one. I don't think this is going to be that much of a pacing mismatch in this one, so I don't think that we have to worry about that. Both teams play decent defensively, so that might help keep the game lower scoring a little bit here. I mean, the total's not that high for a college basketball game, up, though, from 142 to 144, but if both teams are going to play defense, I know both teams kind of play mid-tempo games, but Louisville has been a poor shooting team so far this year, and I thought that was going to, start improving, that they were going to start shooting a little bit better because it's really unsustainably bad, but it still hasn't really happened yet. As far as UTEP, I mean, they're not a terrible team, but they're better defensively than offensively, and I think Louisville is as well. So if you get into a defensive game, it does kind of make sense to look towards the points as well. But the thing is, I mean, look at Louisville's schedule here, man. I know they've lost 3 games in a row, but it was to Oklahoma, who's now ranked. They've actually played a bunch of big games in a row. Indiana, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and they won those first 2 games. Indiana's not as good as what they're ranked then, but that's still a pretty nice win. And then Oklahoma, and then Louisville lost one of their starting players. He's not like their biggest scorer or anything like that, but I did mention they lost, I forget what his name is. I would have to go look again, but they lost him in the Oklahoma game. I think he's not back. He missed the Ole Miss game and actually played Louisville in both of these games because Louisville was actually a favorite against a ranked Ole Miss team, and Louisville just shot horribly in the game. They got absolutely blasted on the scoreboard in that game. I think it really wasn't quite as bad as it looked on the scoreboard. So then I turned around and I played Louisville again in what I thought was a bad spot for Duke. And in this game, Louisville, they played tough, man. They had the lead over Duke. Look at how kind of close they were to beating Duke, man. I mean, they had the lead for pretty much the entire game up through more than midway into the second half, and then Duke finally tied it and then overcame them, and Louisville just couldn't get back into it. And Louisville, again, they improved shooting a little bit, actually. They shot better from 3 than Duke did, but they had a lot of turnovers, and they still just lost the game. This offense still just hasn't been doing it for Louisville, man. And I think that's just a brutal loss when you have Duke on the ropes like that. And I know it wasn't that close towards the end, but they were still within like 7. I thought they were still going to cover for me because I had Louisville plus 8.5 in this game. It's kind of a brutal betting loss, man, as well, with Louisville teasing you by winning almost the entire game and then not even covering at home. Just so brutal for Louisville. And now that's what they're coming off of, and they turn around, kind of quick turnaround time, and they have to play UTEP. And then who do they have to play next? Oh, yeah, number 5, Kentucky, which is not only a highly ranked Kentucky team, but That's also Kentucky, and they're the biggest brother in the state of Kentucky. That's always a huge matchup for Louisville, and that's on Saturday. That's in 3 days. So do you really think Louisville is going to bring their A game in a game against UTEP? I'm going to wager that they do not. And Florida State is coming up after that, too. So this game is surrounded by all bigger conference games. So if they have a down spot in the schedule where it might just be, we're going to get in, get out, and maybe not have total focus, I think it's going to be this game against UTEP. UTEP's not a terrible team. They actually have a better record than Louisville, although I think everybody knows. I don't think the public is going to come in and play UTEP in this game. I think everybody knows Louisville is the better team. Louisville has faced a more difficult schedule, but UTEP, they're kind of flying under the radar, man. I mean, their 2 losses aren't that bad. At Utah Valley, who's not a bad team. I know it was a blowout loss. Utah Valley's been playing pretty well. And then San Jose State actually hasn't been that bad either, even though I know the record isn't that good, but they've been pretty competitive. So that's their ugliest loss, really. And then UTEP, I mean, beating UNC Greensboro and Seattle, that's not too bad. And Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara, those wins are actually decently impressive for UTEP. So UTEP's been pretty competitive. They have played 2 road games already, so having to play on the road is not necessarily going to be that much more of a difficulty for them because they're a little bit used to playing on the road, at least now, because they've done it twice already. And then if you look at their schedule, this is the biggest game they have on their entire schedule, man. As far as playing big conference teams, this is the only one. So do you think UTEP's going to get up for this game? Do you think they're going to have a game circled like this where the only big conference team, they got one ACC team on the entire schedule here this year, and there it is. They get to go and play Louisville, man. You think they're going to be focused on this? I think so. I think we have a big motivation and focus discrepancy here. So give me UTEP plus the points, and that's my only play today. UTEP plus 15. What's up, Zach? Yeah, the OU, your Sooners, they start good and they fall off towards the end of the season. Lay an egg in the conference tournament. Conference tournament doesn't really, well, it doesn't matter though. I don't know. For a team like OU, where I guess they know they're not going to win like an actual championship or anything like that, maybe they do put more stock into trying to win the conference tournament. But I mean, they were in the Big 12 up until this year, right? So Big 12, not easy in basketball, man. There are some powerhouses in the Big 12, Baylor, Houston, Kansas. Very difficult to win that conference. And now they're in the SEC, and it's not much easier. Even though, weirdly, because the SEC is like a physical defensive conference in football, it is not that in basketball. The SEC in basketball is a lot of fast-paced offensive teams that don't necessarily play defense that well. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma adjusts to being over there now. And Texas is over there now as well. Interesting to see, but Oklahoma's off to a good start this year at the very least. Although, again, early season, you do play some cupcakes in the mix there, but they've played some decent teams and played pretty well. So I don't think Oklahoma's that bad. If I were to guess, I would guess that they'll probably make the tournament this year, the NCAA tournament, but we will see what happens. Let's talk about NBA. Oh, and then you got Oklahoma in I don't even know what bowl they're in. I think they're 6-6, right? So they're in a bowl. If you follow their college football, you'll have to gauge whether or not they're going to be motivated for whatever bowl they're in, coming off what really was kind of their biggest win of the season, their biggest bowl game. Kind of a preview of what I'm going to say about the Oklahoma bowl game, whatever bowl they're in. I think that maybe that win over Alabama was a little bit bigger than whatever bowl they're going to be in. So possibly they won't care as much about the bowl, but we will see. And then, the funny thing about Oklahoma is everybody's shitting on Alabama. Like, I thought Alabama should have made the playoff field over SMU. They're objectively the better team. Alabama would be the favorite over SMU. They played a way more difficult schedule, but everybody's bashing the Oklahoma loss. I mean, yeah, it was an ugly loss. Like, you shouldn't lose to anybody really 24-3 or whatever it was. But Oklahoma, everybody's really undervaluing Oklahoma, man. I mean, Oklahoma played a difficult schedule. They're in the SEC now, having to adjust over there, even though they actually have a pretty good defense. It was their offense that was a problem. But Oklahoma, they're, I think, like a top 30 football team, man. Everybody's trashing that Alabama loss. Oklahoma, playing at Oklahoma, a place where you don't usually go, that's not easy, man. In Oklahoma, they do still have a good defense. So what can you do there? All right, back to today's slate before I get out of here. I'm not going to have any other plays here, but we'll talk about NBA. We only got 2 games as we're in kind of that lull before we get back to it, before the storm, I guess. But NBA, we kind of have a light schedule for a little while here as we lead into the holidays, I guess. But this week, especially light. And I was right, of course, about Oklahoma City finally getting playoff revenge there, and I didn't play. Of course, that was the game I didn't play last night. Great. First game up is these 2 games are actually not bad. We get some not bad games on the NBA slate the last couple of days. Atlanta at the New York Knicks is the first game up. You got the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, they're coming off an ugly loss to the Denver Nuggets, where you lose by 30 to anybody, man. That's going to piss you off. And now they get to leave home and go out on the road, and they have a couple of days off. So I do think they're going to be focused on the New York Knicks here. Nobody wants to lose like that. And if that was a close game against Denver, I'd think very differently about this, because they did lose this big win streak that they had where they had some pretty nice wins in there. Coming off that overtime game against LA, they finally lost a game against Denver. And again, if that was a close, like, physical game, I'd be thinking maybe the Knicks are the way to look in this game. But because that was such an ugly blowout, I do think it's going to be a bounce back type of spot for them. And otherwise, again, it would have broken their winning momentum too. So it could have been like a momentum stopper. But I think because they're going out on the road here and the loss was so bad that I do think Atlanta will be focused here. The Knicks, I think they're going to be focused as well, though. I mean, they just went up to Toronto and they didn't really give it their A game. They still got out of there with a win. I think maybe they actually wound up being more focused on this game, although I thought the Knicks would win and cover in that game against Toronto. They did not cover in that game. They did win. Now they're coming back home to face Atlanta. I mean, I think they're going to be focused as well. They know Atlanta's been hot recently. They didn't play well against Toronto or Detroit. So I think I think both teams are going to be focused in this game. So it comes down to, in a game like this where both teams might show up for it, and then it comes down to which team do you think is the better team. I do think that is the Knicks, although they're down from 7.5 to 7. 7 with juice. 63% of the tickets, 83% of the cash. So even though the lines move down on the Knicks, it does look like the Knicks do have the cash disparity on them. But the Knicks have been playing well enough recently that it does look like they have a good record now. So the public might look at this and still want to come in on the Knicks. And you do see they kind of slightly are, but it does still look like the cash percentage is coming in more on the Knicks, even though the line does look like it's dropped a little bit. That is kind of still the way I would look. This is one of those stupid in-season tournament games as well. I don't know if we really care that much about it, but the Knicks have been better at home than away as well. So maybe a little bit of home court advantage being factored in there as well. And then Warriors-Rockets is the other game. This is another pretty good game here. Warriors, as I mentioned, I thought they were going to be able to do. They bounced back and they zigzagged against the Minnesota T-Wolves after kind of an ugly loss to them. Having played them the game before that, they turned around, same matchup, and they were able to zigzag as a lesser favorite than they were in the first game, by the way. And I said it was a zigzag spot where I liked Golden State in that one, although I didn't play it, unfortunately. They won the game, so now they get to kind of take that out on the road with them. They do have 2 days off, but I don't think it's going to be really like a momentum stopper or anything like that when you just won one game, and now you get to take that out on the road with you. The one issue is that Golden State did just beat Houston on December 5th, so is this going to be a little bit of quick revenge for Houston? Maybe. I think Houston is definitely going to be focused on this game. Golden State, are they going to consider that win over Minnesota to be bigger than this Houston game? And are they going to be looking ahead to Memphis and Minnesota? I'm really not sure. So I could see maybe you could call into question Golden State's motivation a little bit, even though Houston does have a good record, so maybe not. Houston, they're coming off an easier game against the LA Clippers. The issue here is that they're returning off a road trip. And it was kind of a sparse road trip, but they had some days of rest in there. They only played 3 games during the road trip there in 6 days, I guess. But they're returning home. They have more rest here, more days off. But is the return home spot going to be like a distraction spot where they're going to return home and get caught up with like family life and daily life and not be focused on the game? I'm going to say no, because it is Golden State. I mean, it's not like you're going to not focus with Golden State coming into your place, especially when they beat you 2 games ago. So I expect Houston to show up in this game. So interesting spot where it looks like, according to what we see in the market, it looks like maybe both teams are going to show up in this game. Houston's actually the favorite, although they do also have the better record. So the public seems to still be coming in on the Warriors side, though, just because they think the Warriors are the better team still, which the odds makers are telling you it's very, very close, with Houston probably getting about 2 points for home court. Houston's down from 2.5 to 2, 58% of the tickets, with 70% of the cash on the Warriors. So it does look like the market has moved in the direction of the Warriors, and they have the public action a little bit here. So a little bit difficult to gauge this game, really. If you lean with the market, then you lean with the Warriors here. I mean, Rockets, like I said, they are still in a return home spot, but I don't think they're not going to show up focused here. I do think both teams will show up focused, and then does it come down to the fact that maybe the Warriors are still the better team, and maybe the records are a little bit misleading here, because I think the Warriors are the slightly better team over the Rockets. We will see, but then there is that extra quick revenge motivation on Houston's side, so difficult again. And then I thought we had one NHL game. We do have two. But really, the Rangers and Buffalo is the more competitive game here. The Rangers really struggling. They're up from minus 130 to minus 135. 95% of tickets, 98% of the cash on the Rangers. So it does look like the money is slightly coming in on the Rangers side. And you got to think the Rangers are going to bounce back at some point. And maybe it's going to be here after having just an ugly homestand where they only went 2-3. And they only beat Montreal and Pittsburgh. Not very impressive. And now they had a game where they gave up 7 goals, which wasn't Shesterkin in net. Shesterkin came back in net and played pretty well, but they still lost to Chicago. So now, even though it is a third game in 4 days and a fourth game in 6 days, they don't have a whole lot of rest here. It is possible that going out on the road for this one game, just going out to Western New York, playing Buffalo might help them focus on hockey and just forget about all the negativity, because I'm sure the media is blasting them. They're in a big media market in New York City, man. They're probably getting torched right now in the media, coming off another loss. But that was Chicago's second game with their new coach there. So I don't know. Maybe Chicago has a little bit of a fire lit under them. I would expect the Rangers, if they're going to have any pride, man, I would kind of expect them to bounce back here, just because they get out of home and kind of ignore those distractions. I mean, they're still the better team over Buffalo, and they're still the road favorite over Buffalo. Buffalo only has 1 day off as well. They're staying at home, and they're mired in a loss streak, so they are going to show up. I mean, it is the Rangers coming into your place. You're going to show up, but I don't know if Buffalo's that good, man. They're coming off a tough game against Detroit. I know Detroit's not that good, but an overtime game. So, I mean, I would have to probably still lean to the Rangers in this one, even though they're giving you a lot of reasons to start thinking that they're actually not that good a team. But, I mean, I still think the oddsmakers are telling you they're still not that bad. So, that would just still be the way I look there. And then Anaheim, Ottawa, this is an ugly game, man. I mean, I don't think we need to really pay much attention to this game. I don't see really any angles here. Ottawa's a big favorite, up from minus 230 to minus 235. So, oddsmakers either telling you that Ottawa's actually pretty good or that Anaheim's that bad. And maybe it's a combination of a little bit of both, but Anaheim definitely pretty bad. Ottawa is public with 78% of the tickets, so we do have 63% of the cash coming in on the Anaheim side. So it does look like a big cash discrepancy in the market here, playing the Anaheim side. I don't know what to think about this. I mean, Anaheim is already out in Canada because they just played Montreal, losing in a shootout. But they were off of games against Vegas and Minnesota. So, and they had kind of their lesser goaltender in there, and Dostal, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but maybe Anaheim's going to be bouncing back a little bit from that because it is kind of an ugly loss to Montreal there. The travel spot's not that bad for them, so maybe you could maybe think that it's maybe a spot to go and look and maybe fire on like an Anaheim puck line or something like that. I don't want to do it. Ottawa's coming off kind of an ugly loss as well. I thought Ottawa was in a good spot to win this game. With the Islanders were coming off an upset win over the Carolina Hurricanes, so I thought it was a good spot to play Ottawa, and they still lost the game. I know it was without Allmark in net. Forsberg was not nearly as good. So Ottawa's coming off an ugly loss too, and it should be Allmark back in net here, and they have an extra day off. But they do have Carolina up next, so maybe they'd be looking ahead to Carolina a little bit and maybe ignoring this Anaheim team, except for the fact that when Ottawa just went out to the Pacific Coast, they actually lost to Anaheim. So maybe Ottawa will focus on this game because they did just lose to Anaheim recently. So I don't know, but tough to read. Again, my one play today, and we have no viewers again. How awesome is that? My one play today is college basketball, UTEP plus 15. I think it's a sandwich spot for Louisville, and that's going to do it for me. Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter for all my shit posting and sports betting related posting and whatever else. And go follow the Tower Gang podcast, of course, the most offensive podcast on the planet. We will be with you tonight at 9:11 p.m. Eastern for more hilarity. Probably going to be talking about the drones in the skies and the shooter of that CEO being gay now that his identity has been revealed. And who knows what else we're going to be talking about tonight. But go subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerGang, and you will get bonus content, live pre-show and post-show. You can sign up and you can get those tonight. And get to submit to the mailbag, even though we probably won't read it, and hang out with us in a Telegram, which is also where the mailbag submissions are. That's going to do it, man. Tower Gang Toad once again. Let's go Tower Gang tonight, baby. Wednesday. Peace out.